Well, it wasn't good, was it? It wasn't good preparation. I'd summarise it as probably 4 words, maybe 5. Unacceptable, but entirely expected. I feel like everyone going into the game expecting anything other than a loss today was probably wishful thinking. I think that the changes were probably logical. Like 4 days, maybe it's against Forest. He played Van der Ven and Romero in the first 45 just to keep them fresh, get them some more minutes in their legs. But today, the proximity to the biggest game is too close, so you change it up a little bit. For me, I think that Danzo was a better fit for the Forest game because you got to face Chris Wood in the air today against pace. If you wanted to get something out of the game, you probably needed to have someone like Mickey Van der Ven in. But again, I understand the logic behind the changes. Archie Gray was wild, like really surprisingly poor. If I'm entirely honest, I don't think that he's fighting for his spot in the team for the next games, for the big games coming up. I think there's probably only 2 spots in the team that are still up for debate in terms of what's his first 11 for the final if we get there. And they were probably on the wings, right? Like Matisse, Tell, or Sonny. I think Tell's probably going into the last few games thinking if Sonny's fit, he starts, unless I put in some worldies. And I thought against Forest, it was really, really impressive. I really enjoyed watching him today. Not so much. And Odobert, I've got a lot of faith in him, and I've got more faith in him than I do in Brennan Johnson. I think Brennan Johnson, obviously, he's very good at conversion. The output's good from him, but the input isn't enough. And I think that having that dual threat to be able to attack teams down both sides is valuable as long as you have a 6 that can switch the play. And that's why I say probably the biggest disappointment today outside of the scoreline, which again, like if you lose 2-1, you lose 5-1, it doesn't really matter at this stage for our league campaign. But the manner in which we just rolled over was really disappointing because you would hope that some of those players, even if they didn't really have a realistic chance, you would hope that they would be just more, I don't know, like, I don't want to say unprofessional, if they were more professional, but would just have more pride in their own appearance. But at stages in that game, it just looked like we didn't know our arse from our elbow and in what to do. And it was kind of harking back to that period around the Aston Villa semi-final and the Liverpool semi-final when it literally looked like there wasn't really clear instruction and that the players were confused around what to do. And if that's the case, if any part of that is true, then of course that goes back to how, what do you think about Ange? I'm sure we can get into that in a second. Or if it's not that, and then it's just, we're just completely outperformed, out-dominated, out-worked, tacticked and out-techniqued by, not that they're even phrases, but by a team that's just so far ahead of us, then that's really problematic, right? Because whatever happens in Europa League it's a moment in time, but your bread and butter is the Premier League. And obviously you hope that next season you get back to something that is more reminiscent of what we've done in the past. And it just looks like at the moment that we are completely bereft of ideas at times when we have the ball, let alone when we don't. When we don't have the ball, it's shocking. And sometimes I just think that just goes back to, I've seen a lot of this video been retweeted. Someone, I'm not sure if it was Johnny or someone posted that video of Eric Dyer's interview when Gary Neville went out. And he was talking about, we don't really do any tactics. We just rinse and repeat the same thing over and over again of how he wants us to play. And that was in the early days of Ange Ball, right? So you could understand that there's like the need to get that message across. I really hope that that's still not the case. But for all intents and purposes, there's no evidence that we do any real work on what we do without the ball. Or sometimes, and I think this is almost like an invisible problem to a lot of people, but I look at some, especially when I go to games and you're not limited by where the camera's peripheral vision, leaves you able to access. But sometimes I look at the players when we do have the ball, but the players that are not near the ball, like maybe Bentancur, who's playing in the 6 or the kind of the whatever, the lower, the deeper of the 8s, and their positional sense when we do have the ball, but the ball's not near them, it's so bad. It's so bad in the rest defense that that if we lose the ball, then in the transition, you're in a quagmire of trouble. And I just think that all of that harks back to what we're doing on the training ground, and it's clearly we're not spending any time or anywhere near enough time contemplating the other side of the game. You know, like what the threats of the defense, the threats of the opposition. What do we do? Because we're on this presumptive curve that we're going to, you know, have 65% possession in the majority of games, and that we're going to create enough chances to outscore the opposition. And it hasn't proven to be the case, you know, for the vast majority of Ange's time here. And it's a real shame that we haven't seemed to improve in that regard. I can tolerate certain aspects of it, and I can certainly like get on board some of the justifications for some of the issues, but at the end of the day, it reeks to me of like there's levels, right? And I just don't think that he's not of the level. A lot of that, I would imagine, comes down to like the fact that the specificities of his system. Everyone take a shot. The specificities of his system, you would imagine that would come with a coaching staff that understand his system, right? But he wherever he's gone, he's just gone by himself and inherited whatever he got at the club. And that to me just reeks of like, I don't know, being used to a level of resources that just isn't really a fit for the standard of football that is expected or acceptable from the Premier League.
So Sean, like, having said all that about the manager, right, we've had a conversation on this channel with pretty much everyone that's called in about if Ange was to win the Europa League or if he wasn't. First of all, do you want to see him moved on? And second of all, if you do want to see him moved on, if we win the Europa League, are you happy for him to stay?
I think there's no time left to move him on before the end of the season. Like, there's no one you're going to get in. I don't want to see Ryan Mason. There's just no point. We are where we are. We've made our bed. It's time to lie in it. Look, I'm with Ange, and listen, you know, I saw Stella on the show as I was first dialing in. You know, there's not. In fact, you know what? I think obviously he and I disagree on a fundamental around the ownership of the club, but there's actually probably lots of things that we probably agree on with regards the other kind of incidentals around the players or whatever. And I actually, you know, I've been saying it for a long time. Saying I know Sim has as well. I think that just on a meritocracy basis, look, I share all the concerns about the manager, but I do think that if the guy does lift the trophy for he'll be the most successful manager in 45 years at Tottenham Hotspur. I think on that basis, I don't know really what we're doing here if we don't at least give him the start of the season. And that said, do I think that he'll spend the money if he's directing the kind of course around what he wants or what he needs? I don't really have or hold too high expectations of getting that right. And do I think that it would work out next season? No, I don't. I think it would be like a Ten Hag thing. I think he probably would be gone by Christmas. I don't really see too much changing apart from the unknowns, right? And the unknowns are essentially what happens if, first of all, his demeanor would change. I would imagine. This is assuming that Levy keeps him and assuming that he wants to stay. His demeanor would change back to probably a little bit more cocky rather than defensive. Also, you're going to have a team of players, the majority of which are 23 or under. Some of them are 19 years old. And they're going to have indelible marks in their character from now on because they are Europa League winners. And that you don't know what that does to your psyche, right? I'd imagine that is the inverse, the entire opposite of someone that's lost their confidence because of an injury, that they can't really trust their body again. And they don't go in like a Van der Ven, maybe not doubling down on his pace, or Bentancur not getting back to his best because he spent so long out and then he gets knocked out again by Matty Cash. Like the inverse of that, right? Like I think that if you've got someone like a Lucas Bergvall, someone like a Solanke, someone like a Richarlison, whoever, insert any of the team there, the fact that they're a Europa League winner, you just wonder whether that kind of invokes some sort of output, some sort of outcome where the wind is in your sails and you've got that monkey off your back, and all of those players suddenly become more successful Tottenham players than all of the legends that have gone before over the last 25, 30 years, right? More successful in a Tottenham shirt than Ledley King, more successful in a Tottenham shirt than Sol Campbell, even though he's not a legend, he's an arsehole, but more successful than Harry Kane, more successful, etc. Those players are suddenly all more successful in a Tottenham shirt than those guys were. And to me, that maybe is an unknown. What that manifests into might be something that can you can harness into some sort of palpably strong energy that can create something different next season. But without knowing that, you can't really rely on that. So I think that on a meritocracy basis, I think you'd be ridiculed if you sacked the guy who's been the most successful manager and brought the thing that every fan has always wanted and complained about the lack of. But do I think he's the guy for like the right guy? No, I don't. But I don't really like the market, the managerial market. I don't really want to see Thomas Frank. I don't really want to see Marco Silva. I don't really want to see most of the managers that are linked with us. The one that I really want is Pochettino. But like the last guy said, you know, it's going to be a really hard effort to get him out of the club before the World Cup, right? Oh, sorry, get him out of America before the World Cup. So,
So, when you're looking at how we played today, right? Do you think it's a case of a lot of people saying it's unacceptable, and which is absolutely right. Like today was pathetic, but what do you do about something like what happened today? Because if it's unacceptable and you want kind of ramifications for it, you can't sack the manager before Thursday. But is this something that because we're basically these Premier League games, we're not going to do anything between now and the end of the season, are we? Like in these Premier League games. So how do we go about judging Ange between now and the end of the season in terms of, because there's this kind of, if you're looking at the fans at the moment, game by game, it's like, well, we're winning Europa League. It's like, okay, I don't really care what happens in the Premier League now. We just want to win that Europa League. And then we'll play the Premier League, we'll lose a game. And everyone's like, oh, sack him tonight. This is unacceptable. 19 late, 20 losses. So how do we go about managing this end of the season? For you, is it just about not caring about the Premier League, or do you still need to take these into account when you're judging it?
I think the way I would... So, you can't sack him now. I'm not someone that's going to overreact. I knew we were going to lose today. I knew we were probably going to lose. I said 4-0, right? So I didn't, just everything, the history, their big occasion. It was never going to be anything other than
we rested all our team, basically, yeah.
Right. So what I would like to see, assuming we do okay against Bodo, and then against West Ham, you've got then like a problem there because it's their cup final, and you're still going to want to, again, pending what happens in the first leg. But ultimately, I think what I want to see from Ange is a bit of motivation. I want him to find the words, and he's very good at finding the words in press conferences to make everyone kind of get sucked back in, or some people to get sucked back in and listen to him. He's a great spin. He's a better spin than Shane Warne, right? But I feel like he needs to find the right words to motivate the people that aren't probably in their own mindset, likely candidates to play in the semi-finals or the final, and find a way to motivate them to put in better shifts than what we saw today. And if he can, utilize the squad. And like, by the way, like the squad, I just don't subscribe to the notion that this squad is absolutely shambolic. I really don't. I think we've got a really cracking, not that we have first team and second team, but that team that was out today is still on paper for me, a far more technically gifted 11 than more than half of the Premier League teams. And so I think that there's far more in their locker that we're just not seeing at the moment. And I personally think that he needs to show to me that even in the Premier League, his mind might be on other things. He might, like the players that are playing in those games might think that they're obviously second fiddle. That goes back to like the Conference League when was it Nuno that sort of...
A team and B team, he said, yeah.
Yeah. And so if you're in that B team, you're kind of like, well, what does that tell you? Like you don't value me. But if the one thing I will say about Ange is he's a wonderful wordsmith, right? So find the words to make these players feel like they're relevant for in whatever way you've got to do it. Tell them that no one's position is safe in that starting 11 for the final if we get there. Tell them that your place in the team is not safe for next season if I'm still here. Whatever it is, and you haven't got to lean into the negative, but you've got to find the words for me to... If the actual league performances themselves are kind of irrelevant, the performances are not, and he needs to show me something that looks like he's earning his crust in that regard. Because as fans, we still pay to go to the games. I paid for my season ticket. I want to see value for money, whatever, but I still want to see an effort put in the few remaining home games. And the guys that went today on the bus, there was still a massive Tottenham section there today. Travelled 6 hours, no doubt, 5 hours back to see that. Not good enough. And I think that needs to be reminded to the players as well that, it's not just about you. We are a club, and that should be remembered. And he needs to find those words because otherwise I don't really know how he's earning his money.
Because I want to read you a snippet of what Maddison was saying in an interview with Spurs TV. He said, we need to put that performance to bed and ignore all the outside noise and negativity. That's not to say fans can't have their say. They will rightly so, but we have to block all of that out because we've got a massive night on Thursday. So does that tell you about maybe how, not just him, but maybe how the dressing room is feeling in terms of, and is that right, in terms of like they've had this shambolic performance that we've just seen, where there was a no-show, they basically gave up, right, which is unacceptable. But they're going to ignore all that because they've got a massive night on Thursday. Now, is that a right mentality to go into Thursday? And also, as a club, should we be accepting these kind of performances? Should we have players saying, you know what, we've just been shite, but let's just put that to one side because we've got a big game on Thursday? Is that an acceptable mentality?
No, it's not. And you know what? Of all of the players in the first team, it doesn't surprise me that those words have come from him, because, and I like him as a player, but I feel like as a vice captain of the football club, there's a responsibility to, like you can believe that in your mind. You can have that kind of conversation if you want to in the dressing room between yourselves. But when you come out in front of the media, we only get like a couple of seconds here, a couple of sound bites there from the manager. We get barely any from the owner. We get sweet FA from the director of football, Scott Munn, we've never heard from, and you get a couple of sound bites here and there from certain players, most of whom have gone out of their way to defend Ange. I don't think you heard that from Maddison. When Maddison's been asked about, Tottenham and him, he's very happy to say he's done well, but the team isn't. Right? Decky's come out and said, that what's going on isn't acceptable. We play well at the top end of the pitch, but at the back it's sloppy or whatever. I'm paraphrasing. There's a little bit of like passing the buck. And I think that when James Maddison comes out and says things like that, to me, it's dismissing. Like I said, he's right. He's right in terms of like we do need to forget that performance, because if we like linger on it as a team, then it's going to damage our reputation or damage our confidence going into. So he's right in that regard. That's not really what you say. So when you come out in front of the cameras, you need to like let the fans know that we're not just a pain in the ass who have a nag about your performance, and that stuff should be ignored, dismissed, and like we need to focus on what we're doing on Thursday. Like you should spend a couple of minutes explaining why, what you think went wrong and what you're going to do about it, and what's the impact going to be of those things. And if you don't change, and he doesn't seem to care about those sorts of elements, and I don't really think it's vice captain like behaviour. And I haven't really seen a lot of that from his commentary when he's been talking to the press. It's a lot of kind of like roadrunner, me, and not so much about us. And that to me is frustrating.
I completely agree. But Shawnee, always a pleasure to speak to you, my friend. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you guys.
Shawnee.
Love you, man.
Love
See
you,
you, boys.
Shawnee.